What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, the Phoenix channel. It is March 29th on a Sunday, a little bit after 6 o'clock, quarantine style. We're doing it here in Phoenix. If you like this content, consider hitting the like button, consider subscribing to this channel. And today we're going to get into all the news and views, even outside the crypto space, just because of everything that's going on. And for those that aren't aware, obviously we have this quarantine fun going on. So want to share my thoughts with it and also get a little discussion going, get a little chat going, kind of old school style. So I have the chat up. If you have a question, drop it in and let's get this started. So obviously for those that are living under a rock who don't know, mostly United States, shout out to everybody in the United States, and everybody around the world actually. But here in the U.S., most places are under some type of quarantine, or there's been some discussions about allegedly having quarantine. Now, obviously, this causes, I think, while the intent is good, I guess where I'm going with it is the fallout from this. Just from the financial systems, the real estate, different financial markets. We're seeing more pressure on these markets that are inflated and we know are in a bubble. So in addition to that, you're seeing pressures just in terms of acquiring the groceries, right, that everybody needs to basically maintain themselves in this quarantine state. So I don't know, guys, how are you faring with all this going on? I'd love to hear what's going on in your neck of the woods. Here in Arizona, I can tell you that pretty much it is just business as usual. Arizona is a little bit interesting in a sense that I think most of the things up to at least this point have been pretty lax in terms of regulating the flow of travel and even restaurants. I mean, we have a lot of restaurants that here are still open and people not necessarily doing any kind of social distancing. So we'll have to see how that actually turns out for the state as a whole. That runs in contrast to what we're seeing in places like California that have huge swaths of cities and other regions which are under much more strict lockdowns. And so there could be arguments, I guess, either way to suggest benefits of those, or maybe some folks that think that's not necessary. My own take on this whole situation, and not to get totally tinfoil hat with you guys, but my whole take on this whole situation is that it is a real, like, pandemic, or I would call it a real virus. But I think the direction we're taking as a country and as a world is totally off, in a sense that what you're not seeing is an interest in developing preventative measures such as vitamins and exposure to the sun and wearing of masks. And because you're not seeing those preparations and education brought out to the people, people don't necessarily know how to react to this type of situation. And so it's causing panic because people are not able to quantify the risk that's involved in a scenario like this. And so they're just going apeshit. And obviously, we all know in the crypto space that the financial markets themselves are rigged to a certain extent. This whole inflated, for example, real estate bubble, especially like how we have it here in a lot of the Western cities, I'd say, in the United States, overinflated prices. I mean, right now you're looking at properties, I mean, just the regular average, nothing special here in Arizona, in a suburb, being close to like $500,000, guys. I mean, that's a lot of money to drop on a house when the average wage here is nowhere close to that. I mean, it's not even a fraction, historical fraction of that. So we know that this whole financial system was going to be unwound regardless of the situation. And I think that this pandemic, if you want to call it that, just exposes that weakness, the cracks, if you will, in a lot of these systems. And you can make the same argument about the health system, right? In the sense that everybody's saying this type of situation is overwhelming the health system. But this vulnerabilities in the health system have been there um, prior to this event. And so this is just a way to expose what has always been there. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how this situation evolves, because um, one of the things, for example, is we're seeing the government come out and give a bailout to corporations of, I think, to the tune of $4 trillion, allegedly. And for the people, I think it was around $2 trillion, like $1,200 for an individual, single individual, and I think up to like $3,000 for a family. And that's a one-time payment. So what you got to ask yourself is, well, first of all, do you actually think that the $1,200, or do you think these one-time payments actually mean anything? I think in the short term, it provides a cushion for a lot of people to perhaps pay for their groceries and pay for some of their bills. But if you happen to live in any of these cities, you'll know that the average mortgage, the average rent here in a place like LA or New York or even Phoenix, which is allegedly more affordable, most of these people are paying somewhere between probably $1,500, I'd say, and maybe $2,000. And again, that's not living it up. That's just your average place. That's just the standard rate that you have here for those places. So if that's the case, that means a person who's being given $1,200, even if they're shacking up with another person, they wouldn't have so much money to spend on other goods or services. And it would be probably underfunding them in terms of what they need to even survive. So, and that's only for a month, guys. We're now hearing that Trump is saying, and I'm not pointing some Trump, I'm pretty politically agnostic. I think they're both clowns. And it's important for everybody who's watching the show, I think, to realize that. If you've watched the Phoenix channel, you know we're all about that. I know there's a lot of people who think like Trump is for the good guys. I don't know. We have like folks like Bixby or some other folks that alleged patriots who think that Trump is going to bring down this deep state or cabal. But I think that's all tinfoil hat theory. I don't think there is any proof that that is going on. I mean, just based on the people that he's appointed to lead these efforts and the moves they've made, and the fact that even this bill for the bailout has in there some kind of stipulation of restricting some of the meeting minutes that the Federal Reserve has with their board, their smaller group of people. It tells you everything you need to know, that this is just a clown show. And in fact, the $1,200 or the $3,000 or however much it is from that one-time payment pales in comparison to the bailout amount of money that these corporations are getting. So you have to kind of review this holistically and understand the magnitude of these bailouts. In a sense, is the Federal Reserve, like they've always have been doing, which is an unelected body of people, at least from the American population, having the ability to print up money, give it to their cronies, and for us as the American people to have our existing money that we have in all of our bank accounts become further diluted and inflated. And so that, I think, will lead to, in the long term, higher prices, the requirements to work even more hours than what we're doing now just to have any form of wealth. So all these people who think that these bailouts are, I guess, somehow good or somehow it's amazing. I guess my question would be, why don't the Federal Reserve just print up $100 trillion? Why not just print up $50 trillion? Why stop at $6 trillion? Why not make it uh, 10 times the amount, make it $60 trillion, and give out $10,000 to every family. I mean, why stop at $1,200? Um, and so I haven't found anybody who's been able to answer that question. And once again, um, the people who are in power right now, whether you're a left fan or a right fan, it really doesn't matter. They're all cronies. And basically, they just shafted once again the American people. Because a real and that goes to folks, especially on the conservative side, who say this is supposed to be pro free market type of I guess system we have in place. Well, you just bailed out all these industries which should have failed, and you should have let people who actually have saved their money and who actually have real forms of wealth start their businesses, right? That was the old school way of doing things. And now it just seems like we have a system that rewards all kinds of behavior, and there's a blurred lines morally on what's even right or wrong. Um, and that doesn't spell sustainable to me. It doesn't seem and suggest that we're on a sustainable type of trajectory, um, just in terms of even solving any of these issues. It's almost insurmountable if you want to think about it that way. I mean, where we're at right now as a country or as people is pretty ridiculous if you think about it, where we are so focused on essentially surviving on a month-to-month basis is how I could describe it, with the printing of these checks. That does very little to address the fundamental issues that will be exposed from this crisis, even 6 months from now or a year from now. And that's what's very interesting to me, is that the market, even locally, hasn't priced it in. I think you have a lot of people that are looking at this incident, and after they take it in, even still optimistic that within 2 weeks things are going to be back up and running. And anybody who's in industry or who's working on any kind of projects knows that we're seeing widespread impacts on this event, whether you believe the event or not. Okay, there are certain things that are taking place, dislocations in terms of logistics and supplies, and even the availability of personnel getting sick or whatever. So there's different types of operational strategies that these organizations are using, and because they are using those organizational strategies, it's leading to a reduction in the production. It's leading to a reduction in the ability for those companies to produce goods and services, which means a reduction in GDP. You can't have an economy that continues to grow in the face of less goods being produced. So you can print all the money you want, but if you have the same amount of goods that are being produced or less, it is essentially going to lead to a recession. And from my perspective around here, that hasn't necessarily been priced in. It hasn't been priced in terms of someone's overall strategy on what they're doing, just even in terms of their life. It hasn't been priced in terms of real estate markets. We're still seeing crazy prices here in real estate. And so I think the next 6 months are going to be, 6 to 12 months are going to be interesting. And I think those that actually hold cash, which runs contrary to, I think, what most people are thinking. A lot of people are thinking that gold will do well and Bitcoin will do well. And I think they will do very well. And I'm personally kind of recommending for my family to take some positions in there. That's just what I'm doing. That's not investment advice. Just to hedge our bets or hedge our risk, I would say. But you also have to understand that there's a huge demand for US dollars, because US dollars are used to settle a lot of these financial contracts and financial transactions all around the world. And there's essentially a run on the demand for these things. So that's why I think you're seeing the response you are from the Federal Reserve and from the market participants. But at some point, that's going to come to an end. And when it does, because of all the printing that you're seeing, it's essentially inevitable what the conclusion will be, and I think it'll be actual increase in the cost of goods, services, and any real assets, including real estate, gold, Bitcoin, etc. And what's really interesting this time around is the fact that we have the Bitcoin happening in I think less than 50 days now. So that's not that far away, guys, and it seems like it's going to culminate, which is really interesting, exciting, and scary all at the same time with this financial event, because the financial event, once again, hasn't necessarily been priced in. What we're dealing with right now is asymmetrical information, which we've always described on this channel. We've always talked about it, guys. The fact that Bitcoin holders and EOS holders, a lot of crypto OGs, a lot of crypto guys and gals are, I think, unique. I mean, the vast majority of the population has no idea about the Federal Reserve. They don't understand how money works. Very few people even know that in 1971, or prior to 1971, I would say, we had a gold-backed system with the US dollar. So there's a lack of financial education, which allows the existing corrupt system to, I think, remain in existence. But I think when you start to see price dislocations that become more apparent, we're starting to see some of those, and it's going to be interesting to see if that's a short-term move or if we're really seeing some real moves here. An example of that, guys, just to better articulate this, would be if you were to try to buy a gold coin right now, and the spot price of a gold coin, or the price of gold on the New York, or I should say the COMEX, right, Commodities Futures Exchange, versus the price of a gold coin, okay, a physical gold coin, and those premiums that you're seeing are going off the roof. I mean, we've never seen these. It's very rare you've seen this premium. And what I mean by the premium is the difference in the price that's quoted on the exchange versus the price you have to pay to acquire the actual coin from a local shop, or if you were to order it from a reputable dealer online. You're seeing a huge premium for that, which tells you that there is some type of an issue that's occurring because of the increase in demand for the physical good. And so you do have to question why that is and what's going on in the market to I guess, initiate that market behavior, because everything's behavior. Everything comes back down to emotions of fear and greed. And you're seeing more people have an interest for whatever reason, and you could argue if it's right or wrong. But that's not the most important point. The most important point is what people are doing. And right now, people are willing to ask questions later and basically, take delivery of their commodity, take delivery of their gold. And by the way, we're also seeing that with Bitcoin, which is another thing I wanted to mention here, is that what's going on, Rezi? You're seeing that with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, you're seeing OGs actually demand or take delivery of their Bitcoin and put it on their wallets. Now, I think the reason behind that is twofold. One is exchanges like Coinbase and Polo, we've seen them in the past have tremendous issues with, or I would say Polo. I wouldn't say Coinbase, but I would say Polo, okay? Poloniex, back in the day, I'd say 2015, 2016, did have a number of issues. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Custody issues where folks like myself attempted to get assets from Poloniex and were locked out. And when I say locked out, guys, I'm talking about months, like 6 months, 9 months. And that wasn't in a crazy financial scenario, or I guess you could say scenario, okay, like what we're going to go through. If we're going to go through a tremendous market dislocation, that means if they're lending those assets and for some reason something blows up, they basically own your crypto. And if you don't have that in your private wallet, um, you're allowing Coinbase and Poloniex to speculate on your behalf. And so you have to ask yourself if you're okay with that, because whether or not you speculate, whether or not you take ownership of your Bitcoin, um, understand that you're still speculating. You're still allowing Coinbase and Poloniex to speculate on your behalf. And actually, they're doing it without even paying you. So they're kind of like pimping you out. Without even paying you money. I hate to put it that way, but that's kind of what it is. So guys like me, I've kind of talked about this in some of the channels I'm involved in. My plan is, and most of it's already out of there, in terms of most of my assets are already out of Coinbase, but the additional amounts I've been DCAing every week or 2 weeks. I've been doing just regularly throughout this whole down market cycle. I'm getting those out of there. And I would suggest that folks who maybe aren't as aware start to look into that and start to prepare for it, because you don't want to you don't want to get caught with your pants down and basically get all your crypto basically jacked from your ass. Okay, so what's up, Cryptoff? He asked, are the hospitals in your area overflowing? We have heard some anecdotal type of reports here in Arizona that suggests there is some crowding, I would say, in specific units within the hospitals. But I have to be honest with you, we haven't seen as many reports as I'd expect to be able to substantiate some of those claims. But with the realization that the other concern we have out here, at least in Arizona, is the lack of testing. So I don't even think it's so much like hospitalization. I'm actually just questioning, like, why the fuck? I mean, we're supposed to be the best country in the world and have all these resources. Why can't we just test people, prove that someone has an antibody, and just be done with it? Allow those people to go back to work. Because I think a lot of people actually in America have gone through the coronavirus, is my own take on it. I mean, I observe people I live with here, and this was back in January, who had very, I call it very severe type of symptoms that closely resemble the coronavirus. And so I kind of question about what is it that we're dealing with. What's going on, Drawing Show? What's happening? Hey, yo! But we also have seen some videos from other people on YouTube showing that a lot of hospitals are not overwhelmed. So I think it's a little bit of 50-50, and you're going to have pockets in the United States that have that activity, have outbreaks. I mean, that's just natural with the virus. But I think the thing that is frustrating for someone like me, who's a little bit more of a, I guess, a holistic naturalist kind of a guy, you guys know I'm all about that, is the lack of education that is given to people, right, in the United States to say, okay, this is what's going on, and here's some natural things that you can apply to your body and consume that is not necessarily going to prevent you from getting this, but if you do get it, it's going to mitigate the effects on your body, because we all have that ability to do that. But instead of going in that direction, seems like the media and government are trying to hype this and actually instill a lot of fear in people. And not to get tinfoil hat with you guys, okay? Don't sue me, bro. But basically, like, fear can be used, unfortunately, and not even allegedly. This is not even for educational purposes, but fear can be used in a way to pass a lot of things and undermine our existing rights, correct? So we have certain inalienable rights as human beings. We obviously value the freedom to travel, for example. Well, let me ask you a question, guys. How would you feel if the government or a certain group who works with the government made a rule, and not to get tinfoil hat here, but I'm just calling it out, how would you guys feel if someone said, if you do not have a certain vaccine, or you cannot show proof that you have a certain vaccine, okay, and you don't have a certain ID that shows that you have the vaccine, you're not going to be able to travel. I think logically, and I'm not, again, trying to raise too many alarms here, but I think just based on the logic progression of what we're seeing with these different states that are enacting their own travel restriction rules, if you look at what happened in New York to Rhode Island, you're starting to see some of that. So I guess my point is the next progression of that is travel restrictions based on an inability for someone to show documentation that they've received a vaccine from some company that the government deems as valid in establishing the person will not infect others. Now, we've seen some examples of that with schools, right? We've seen some examples where if someone's not vaccinated, they cannot go to school, or it's like mandated. But we haven't seen it for the purposes of like travel, right? Out of state or to another country. And unfortunately, guys, unless we get in front of it and have these types of difficult conversations for a lot of people and speak out against it, and if you guys don't make your videos and support these types of discussions, the whole thing just, unfortunately, a lot of people are not educated on this and will just go for it because they're in such fear. They're just going to say, yeah, I'm good with it. And it's up to us to have a dialogue, especially as folks who I think are a little bit more forward thinking and a little bit more in tune with just all these things that are around us that make us aware, to have difficult conversations with other people so that they're aware of these things and they know what time it is. So Kryptov says, I think they are hyping this up in order to be their scapegoat for the failure of the economy and falling collapse of the dollar. And I would agree with you, brother. I mean, me and Rezi were actually talking about this before I made this video, and we were saying the same thing. Like, this would have happened regardless, and this is just a way to scapegoat the cracks that were already present prior to this whole thing happening. Because if you look at, like I said, real estate, you look at student debt, you look at the health care system, all these things are basically just shit that wasn't really built solidly anyway, built on very weak foundations, and it was just a matter of time before it became exposed and collapsed. And so that's where we're at right now. And so people are just the sad part, though, is, here's the sad part, Kryptov and team. The sad part is, I don't even think, though, like, average people, I think like I agree it's an excuse for these things, but what I'm saying is, like, also a lot of people haven't caught on to the fact that you're actually going to see a substantial market dislocation. Like, people are still very, relatively, I would say, optimistic for whatever this shit is. And I just think that is kind of interesting and kind of sad at the same time. So I don't know what's going to happen. And I think for OGs and for crypto holders, I think we just need to be agile and just be open to change, and not have any allegiance to the current system. Because I think that's where people get compromised, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Like this plate, like this pad right here. I mean, these pads are probably worth over $500,000. So if someone signed up for a 30-year mortgage, even, and with a low interest rate for 30 years, okay, their monthly is astronomically high, and they've signed up for it, so they are obligated, or they're not obligated, but I would say they're kind of locked into the system to hope that this existing, whatever this, the income they're getting and this current system keeps stable for that period of time. And with the current state that we're in, there is no such thing as stability, I would argue. The stability is gone. It's done. We have to create our own stability, and I think the way we do that is to go more local with all kinds of shit that we should be doing, which is our own housing units, our own land, our own food, all kinds of independent distribution systems that make us more resilient to impacts that occur in the globe. So this whole existing architecture with cookie cutter houses, and just my take, isn't necessarily sustainable. Um, and so I don't think that's been priced in or acknowledged. And it's not even just from a financial standpoint. It's also like just kind of um, like a spiritual perspective, right? So that's just something that's just been something on my mind lately, and I was wondering what you guys think about it, because I'm seriously like on that mindset where even as a, even for people that say make six figures, is this even worth it? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's that kind of mindset. So, Drawing Show says, do you think this funding distribution to individuals could turn into a UBI? I absolutely do think it will be. I mean, that's what I was mentioning. Like, basically, the $1,200 ain't shit. Like, the $1,200, I mean, maybe in some Midwest town that has rent for $600, maybe you could do something with that. $1,200 in Los Angeles or Phoenix or Miami or New York or a place like DC, that's that's not that's not going to get you anything. Like, that won't even buy you your rent. You know what I'm saying? So, and the fact that I don't even know what the intent of that was. Like, what is it? Just to make it last for another month? Like, this is gonna continue to probably go on for a while, even though it's a somewhat minor virus. So I think we're just kind of winging it without a real plan, and I think people are just hoping for the best. But here's the thing, like, here would be the crazy part. So they print up all this money, and they give it to everybody, you and I, and let's say they even go to $2,000 or even more every month, and we're chasing more and more of the same goods or less quantity of the same goods. Does that lead to supply shortages? And so then where do we go from there? And so this whole thing just really it really smells bad, guys. Like, it really it really just seems like we're headed in a really bad direction, just in terms of US dollars. I think for now it'll work, but that's what I'm kind of looking out for, is like, how far can they keep going with this thing? Um, and for those that have talked to me, and kind of on a personal level, I started to advise my family, and shout out to my family if you're out there watching this video. But I started to advise my family to take up like 10-20% of their wealth into gold and Bitcoin. Mostly actually in gold, because a lot of these people are older, and while Bitcoin has a higher upside, you could argue, gold has been around for thousands of years. Not going to go anywhere in terms of holding its own. And so gold isn't about making money. Gold is about maintaining your wealth, maintaining your relative wealth. And so what I did is I allegedly got into more gold this week. I actually put about 30% of my fluid cash holdings into gold, and I'm thinking about making another purchase real soon, just because I'm seeing the lead times and the spread on gold increase. And what do I mean by that? Well, like, the lead time is, if you were to put an order in right now for gold, they're saying like it's a 2-week lead time, 2 to 3 week lead time, and these are like reputable places that have the gold or have historically provided gold. So that's not a good sign, guys. On top of that, the premium is increasing. So like, the spot price is maybe $1,700. The price, or $1,600. The price we're seeing is, it's like a $200 premium, or a couple $100 in some cases premium on it, and a lot of them are saying they're out of gold. So that just tells me, man, what time it is. I'll ask questions later, you know what I'm saying, and I'm out, So that's kind of our plan. That's kind of what we've been doing. I do like silver a lot more than gold, because with silver you can, it's a lower denomination, so from a practical standpoint, you'd probably want to hold silver. The problem with silver is like um, it's just hard to transport. There's just you cannot transport it so well. Whereas with gold, even with 10 coins, I mean that's for most average people, you're good. You know what I'm saying? That would be your wealth right there. So from that perspective, I like gold because it's transportable and you can move around. It's maneuverable, but it's harder to divide and use unless you're going to make like a big purchase, like a farmland. And that's the other thing that we're looking at. I'm looking at like some farmland and just like strategically straight up like trying to figure out like, okay, I got some cash, and if the cash really becomes a problem for a lot of people, maybe you could swoop up a good, you know, good land piece here and actually just grow some food and get the fuck out. And that's just my take. But a couple comments here. Drawing Show says, hope it's reoccurring funds every month. Otherwise, the folks that lost their jobs going to be wrecked. I think it will be. I mean, like I said, I don't see it. I don't see a possibility of just a one-time payout of $1,200 being anywhere close to what people need. Keeping in mind that 30% of the world, 30% of the population works in some kind of service industry, right? In the United States, I should say, works in some kind of service industry. So you think about like restaurants and hotels and airlines and concierge services and Uber drivers. I mean, some of those they could probably sort of redo or realign their services, maybe to food delivery services or something that would work. But a good percentage of those people are just not going to be able to recover anytime soon. And so that's at least 25 to 30% of the population. So you're going to need some kind of a reoccurring funds to help them sustain themselves, or some kind of a governmental worker program to put those people to work. So either way you look at it, there's heavy amounts of spending. If you want to call it UBI, call it that. But what I look at it as is massive printing of money and the inflation of the monetary supply with less products produced, which is going to lead to inflation. So that's how to look at it. But yeah, you could hope it's reoccurring, and it. I mean, I hate to say I hope or I don't hope. I guess I'm agnostic to it personally, but either way, we need to monitor it and prepare. So Kryptov says they are just buying time to position troops. I think that's the case, Kryptov, and I'm kind of wondering how that's exactly going to work out. Like, is that going to be like the positioning of troops and then distribution of food, or is it going to be like more positioning troops and then like, you know, like basically some crazy dystopian kind of scenario? I kind of hope it's the former, obviously, but you don't know with these people. So I do know that unlike a lot of countries, a lot of Americans are, you know, former military, and a lot of patriots are former military, and so it'll be interesting. I don't know. I'll just say that. I mean, I don't think it's going to be as a walk in the park kind of a thing. Drawing Show says, so hard to get gold and silver. It is. It's like weeks out right now. So if you haven't done that already, I really suggest consulting with some different various suppliers. I'm not going to recommend any because I don't want to be looked at as a shill. But there are a number of them, and I would say it's probably best to check a couple different sources and see which one has the best lead time, and maybe even pay premium to get it shipped to you. Drawing Show says Valet Combibar is the way to go for golf and silver. I have no idea what that is. It says, yeah, curious how we're going to prevent inflation. This is going to get bad when they start writing checks. I mean, they're already going to do that if you think about it. I mean, if you extend this another month, you're probably looking at least another $2 trillion, right? So we had, just to recap for everybody who's not aware, we had $2 trillion for that's incoming right now for these first sets of checks. you're probably looking at another set of those, another 2 trillion for the next month. So if you just expound that out, expound the $2 trillion out for each month, and let's say hypothetically you have a situation that lasts 1 quarter. Okay, so that would be 1 quarter, guys, is 3 months, right? You have 4 of those in a year. So let's expand this out another quarter. That'll be at least $6 trillion. So for every quarter that we go out, we're looking at $6 trillion, and that doesn't include the corporate stuff, guys. That's just basic payment to, I think, the American people, not on top of the other bullshit that'll have to be passed. So if you expand that out to a more realistic 6 months, you're probably looking at more like $12 trillion, which would be insane. And again, that doesn't include the corporate bailouts. So how long, I guess my question to you guys is, as educated people, I mean, we're all just learning about this and understanding it, but if you have a bailout system that just prints more money to people, you're expanding this money supply, how long can you keep doing that? How long can you just keep inflating the money supply until like it just basically loses its value? And that's what we need to start thinking about. We need to like get that in our minds and like start positioning ourselves accordingly, whether it's Bitcoin, gold, some fucking land, I would say. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And because I know I don't necessarily have the US dollar cash to buy land, I was hoping to like figure out like if other people want to do this or not in my community, and just go buy some land and bounce out. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my plan. But Drawing Show says B bar is like Kit Kat bars that allows you to break off pre-weighted quantity of gold and silver. Okay, I got it. Okay, that yeah. Resi makes a good point here, and this is something I covered about 6 months ago. If you guys aren't aware, I did make a video about 6 months ago. There was like a IMF World Bank paper that came out, and the IMF World Bank paper that came out, and I'll try to put the link in the description below once I'm done with this live stream, but it did talk about basically this plan to transition the United States, and in fact, I guess most of the world, into a digital system. And so Resi makes a good point that expanding the dollar supply until people are forced to accept dollars is probably the eventual evolution of this system, because if you think about it, well, I'm not so sure about that. Let's back up. Like, so obviously, U.S. dollars and this fear could lead to people actually throwing their money into banks that actually pay them negative interest. And so what that means is over time, as you keep your money in the banks, they will actually charge you money to store your money with the bank. And so people will then want to have or desire to actually keep their own money to themselves, right? So they're not being charged the fees from the bank. But a lot of these institutions, like the World Bank Forum, have now talked about forcing a transition into digital dollars so that they can control dynamically the flow of money and actually make sure that they're able to charge everybody the fees for the privilege of holding the cash, right? So that's another reason why I think Resi's point about us being forced to accept digital dollars will probably be the case. And the other point I'd make is that actually what was interesting is in that bill that was kind of drafted up. It didn't actually get into the official bill, but it was like a part of the bill. They actually had in there a stipulation or a section that called out the drafting of or the distribution of the money through a digital wallet. So they started talking about some kind of a ledger technology that they were going to use to distribute the dollars. And so once again, you could see that they've been working on this for a while. This isn't something that is due to this crisis. This has been in the works for a while. If you studied the white papers that like I said, I made a video on that was like at least 6 months ago. We know there's been some plans for this type of transition. So the question right now is just how they implement it, but we know it's coming. So if you know the playbook, what do you do now to get in front of that? And I think the right move right now is actual asset acquisition, and obviously having some cash on hand, so you can pay your bills, but acquiring assets to the extent you can, especially real hard assets like land, with water, you can grow food, and not be dependent on a failing system, because that's kind of where it's going, guys. So yeah, that's kind of my rant for tonight, guys. I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you guys think will be? Where do you guys see this? I guess my question for the night I'm gonna end it up with is, where do you guys see this going in, say, a month? So if we look out and we're a month from today, okay, so today is what, the 29th, March. So if we are in April and we're at the end of April, where do you see things going? Because at that point, you would have the checks distributed, okay? You'd have a realization that probably we're in a little bit over our head is what I'm thinking is going to happen, meaning this virus or whatever the fuck you want to call it, because there's not an education on vitamin C and just proper preventative measures, is probably going to get out of control. So with this engineer crisis, or this purposeful crisis, going on longer than people anticipated, there's probably going to be a need for another bailout. And it seems like there's rules ratcheting up travel restrictions unless you have a vaccine with this ID 2020, like Rezi's mentioning. And so that's kind of where I see things going. This is kind of just a narrative to, it's kind of a way to provide the justification for all these systems when there's not really a need for them. There's not really a need for them, and but we're automatically there, and because everybody's so fearful, they're like, okay, we need to do something. So, and then Drawing Show says his prediction: 1 month still in quarantine, got checks, no toilet paper, lots of shit out of stock in stores. I mean, that's kind of where we're at already, man. I don't know where you're at, but I talked to like my family who's in LA, and there's like no toilet paper. There's like no toilet paper. Like I talked to one of them yesterday, and they were happy to get a box of toilet paper, literally. So how, like, if that goes on for another 2 months or another month, I don't know, guys. What do you think? You know. So what we did, or a lot of us did here, when we got word of this shit, is we went out, and it wasn't because we thought it wasn't because originally I thought the virus was legit or not. I mean, you could argue that point any day. You're not here to argue. I don't think arguing that point satisfies anything. It's like, whether it is real or not, the fact that people don't have the information and can't think is going to lead them to be fearful. So they're going to naturally, because they're uncertain about something, they're going to go out and acquire all these goods. So we got in front of that, got a lot of it, and we were thinking more like, I thought like legitimately 30 to 60 days would be like conservative. Like that would be like more than enough, you know what I mean? And now with this information that we have, I'm thinking that's actually light. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm looking at like some plan B type moves. But yeah, this has been a really good discussion, and hopefully we can have it at least on a weekly basis. I'll try to do another one, guys. Rezi says Bill Gates, mandatory vaccine, RFID, microchip ID. He did talk about that stuff, so I'm kind of like, I don't know. Rezi says his stores are fully restocked. I don't know, Rezi. You want some special store there, man. I'll be straight up with you. Like over here, they haven't really restocked shit. Like there's no rice, there's no beans. There's a few, like I would say, like housing. What do you call it? Like paper towels, but there's not really toilet paper. So they are just going ape shit over here. um, we'll see how it evolves. But I do agree with Resi. I think that is the narrative. I think that's kind of what this is all being pushed to. And I think with that, maybe they'll bring in the UBI and maybe motivate people that way to say, okay, if you get this vaccine with this chip, maybe we'll give you this UBI. Y'all know that I'm not about that, so I won't be doing that. So if you're not doing that, though, that means you have to think and you have that personal responsibility, right? So that means you probably need to have your own food and your own water and have your own community and kind of have your own self-sustaining kind of a system going on. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. But yeah, Resi real confident about that Save Mart. It's all back. It's all back. It's all back. I mean, we're not disputing it, Resi, but I'm just telling you, like, in other regions, I could tell you, like LA, for sure, they ain't all back, man. Like, it's like they're like, as soon as they restock it, it goes out. So, yeah, man, we'll see how it goes, man. But this is Phoenix. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Definitely drop in Resi's UFO podcast channel.